Hello guys, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Here I will convey a little about evaluating arguments from the book Mindscapes Critical Reading Skill and Strategies. Reasoning is divided into two, namely deductive reasoning and inductive reasoning. Deductive reasoning follows from general to specific, and inductive reasoning follows from specific to general or conclusion. Deductive reasoning occurs when general principles are used to reach specific conclusion and the conclusion leads to evidence or data or reasons. Deductive reasoning is used when the writer starts with a general statement. Scientists use deductive reasoning to prove a generality by conducting different experiments. This might be called a top-down approach. One of the most common types of deductive reasoning is called a syllogism. The syllogism is the basic step. To evaluate an argument, you first need to identify the problems, point of view, and supporting arguments. You have to understand what the author is saying. You must understand how the author constructs and structures the arguments. Inductive reasoning occurs when specific information leads to general conclusion. Evidence, data, or support makes the conclusion reach logically. This will be the type of reasoning used by the jury to pass a judgment on the defendant's guilty or innocent beyond a reasonable doubt. This type of reasoning might be called a bottom-up approach. This is the most common form of reasoning. There are some tips to quickly recognize deductive and inductive reasons. Deductive reasoning occurs when conclusions lead to proof or support, and general principles are used to reach specific conclusions. Meanwhile, inductive reasoning occurs when evidence or support leads to a possible conclusion through a logical process. Specific supporting points lead to generality. And the next is deconstruction and evaluation of arguments. The purpose of an argument is to persuade the reader to accept the author's point of view. As a critical reader, you must consider who the author is aiming to read. The first step in evaluating an argument is to identify the components of the arguments or map the arguments. Well, this mapping involves in the first, identify the problem. In the second, identify the author's point of view on the problem. And the third is identify supporting arguments. And the last is identify the type of support used to persuade the reader. Now, after determining the components of the arguments, you need to evaluate the argument as a whole. You must know whether the author's point of view is sufficiently supported by the evidence provided. And if an argument is an argument whose point of view is proven by supporting arguments, when the supporting argument is complete, credible, and consistent with the point of view, we judge the argument to be reasonable. On the other hand, an argument does not make sense if its supporters are trustworthy or if it does not fit the author's point of view. Sound arguments are strong argument. An unreasonable argument that is incomplete, unreliable, or inconsistent is called a weak argument. To see error in reasoning in an argument, you need to map the argument first and you need to evaluate the reasons in the arguments. There are some steps to evaluate arguments. And the first, map the arguments. And the second, evaluate the reasons. Determine whether the reasoning is deductive or inductive. Determine if the supporting arguments are relevant. And the third is determine if the arguments make sense. Determine whether the argument is complete and credible. And the fourth, determine if the argument is consistent. The relevance or absence of a supporting argument is related to the presence or absence of errors in the auto reasoning. And the next is error in reasoning. Logical errors are also known as fallacy. A fallacy from a Latin word meaning to devise or the error is a defect in reasoning which first claims might appear reasonable or logical. Often the error in reasoning is that a writer is operating from certain assumptions or beliefs which make the argument implausible. Assumptions are beliefs that the author holds true, often unstated that inform his arguments. Assumption can take the form of bias, prejudice, and stereotypes when the author's assumption infer with his argument the result in a logical fallacy. A logical fallacy occurs when the premise or supporting argument do not support the conclusion directly, which makes the argument irrelevant, unreasonable, or good. Propaganda aims to mislead and manipulate readers to advance an agenda. Propaganda is a deliberate fallacy or reasoning whose main purpose is to mislead. Propaganda is a type of message that serves to present an agenda or promote a unilateral point of view. Propaganda has a negative connotation as the term implies that a writer intentionally manipulates the reader, confuse issues and use deception or tactics, and this should be taken into account when evaluating an argument. Here are statements that have an error in reasoning related to relevance. Identify the error from the list of possibilities below. 1. Glittering generalities are overarching statements that are not supported by solid evidence. Positive endorsement is vague and usually relates to abstract concepts such as love, honor, freedom, and other positive but abstract values. No concrete arguments were made. And 2. Appeal to authority or testimonial is the opposite of personal attacks. In these types of irrelevant argument, an individual's testimony is considered evidence of a point of view simply because that person is considered an authority. However, the authority of the persons is questioned. The bandwagon is a fallacy in reasoning where the author claims that everyone does this, so you should do it too. And the fourth is blind faith is a fallacy in reasoning where a writer tries to convince the reader that someone can be trusted. This technique is often used in political campaigns. And the five is personal attack, or ad hominem is a technique of attacking the opponent by name rather than discussing a problem at hand. And the sixth is strawman fallacy occurs when the opposing argument is misinterpreted and then it is said that the original point of view has been discussed. This error in reasoning oversimplifies misrepresents the original argument. Sometimes quotes are used out of context as evidence of an opponent's positions. And the last is an appeal to emotions is used to evoke strong emotion in the reader in order to give strength to the author's point of view. The appeal is emotion, not logic. The author uses language that is loaded and emotional and manipulates the reader. For an argument to be sound, there must be support that is complete, credible and consistent and relevant to the point of view. The following four errors in reasoning might indicate relevance, but they are unreliable, inconsistent in supporting a point of view, are incomplete and inadequate support for fully explaining and supporting the point of view. And the first is non-sequiturs are the point of view of the conclusion does not follow the argument. And the second is a false cause and effects relationship does not necessarily make sense. There might be other explanation for apparent causations. And the third is a faulty analogy is made when there is an incorrect assumption that two situations are parallel and comparable. And the last is circular reasoning. The author supports the point of view by stating the point of view. No native support offered. Here are tips for evaluating argument. That is there, map the argument, determine if any type of error in reasoning is present, determine if the reasoning is inductive or deductive, check the argument for relevance, identify the type of support, and check to see if the arguments are consistent, believable, and complete, and check the credential of the author, and the last is determine the intended audience. That's all for me. Thank you for watching. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bye bye.